Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter, and today I'm painting these two beautiful models, Hera, daughter of Helm. One of the new additions by Games Workshop in collaboration with Forgeworld. They have just been released. I've received them this week and I really enjoyed painting them. Because of course nothing is more fun than to dive just right in and try and get a beautiful result. Now I'm going to show you how I painted these two models of Hera. But before I do, I would love it if you leave a comment below. Tell me what you think of this video, leave a like if you want, and please consider subscribing to the channel, as I'll be making a lot more videos for you guys. So to continue on this tutorial, I have primed both models of Hera in a light gray base color. You can use, for example, gray cere or any kind of bright gray. For the horse, that would be amazing because it's a white horse and a dark undertone is going to be very, very tricky. So this is a perfect start. I'm going to show you how I paint Hera with the standing model, and afterwards I'm going to show you how I painted the details on the horse. So stay tuned. As you can see here, I did some modeling sand to the bases and sprayed the entire model. Now we're going to start off with a base color of Bugman's Glow for the face. There's just a tiny piece of skin showing on these models because she's wearing gloves. So it's just the face, and pay a lot of attention to it because that's the most standing out feature of this model. Once we base coated the face, we're going to layer it with some Cadian flesh tone. And what I'm doing here is I'm touching most parts of the skin again, just leave some deeper recesses like the eye sockets dark, but go over mainly most of the rest of this face. And I do so by adding a first line, kind of an outline, and then kind of wet blend the rest in there. Maybe it's better visible here with some chisel of flesh. I'm repeating the same process. You can see the nose, the eyebrows, the cheekbones. I'm covering in a lighter tone, and afterwards I wet blend the rest of the paint in there so that the more pronounced areas are very visible and reflect the most light, of course, in natural life. And I'm repeating this step by mixing some palette witch flesh into the chisel of flesh to make it even a little more pale on some points, but just the very tip of the nose, the tip of the cheekbones, etc. I'm simultaneously painting the horse variant, and I'm going to show you afterwards. Then with pure palette witch flesh, I'm painting in the eyes. Make sure you have a fine tip, make it a little bit wet but not too much, because then your paint is going to run and you want those dark areas around the eye. Then try and paint in a pupil with Abaddon black. This is always the most tricky part of painting a miniature, in my opinion, because you might have to do the face all over again. Well, with some Rhinox hide mixed with Doomble brown and about a 50-50 mix, I painted the base color of the hair. She has this nice red hair, red-brown hair, and it's a lot of the miniature, so also pay attention here and try and pick out those loose strands of hair hanging on her face without touching the skin tone, of course. Next we are going to be highlighting this hair with red skin flesh mixed into Doomble brown. And it creates kind of an orangey look, which is the look I'm going for. And I hold my brush sideways like this. Make sure that there is not too much paint on your brush, and you can very easily pick out those tiny hairs you see here. Take your time, go around, make sure you've picked all of those details, and you get a very nice result immediately. But we're going to take it a little step further, because the sun or the light is reflecting off the top of her head, so I'm using pure redskin flash to create a top highlight on this model, and some very tips at the end of her hair that would naturally reflect the most light. Then she has some silvery bands in her hair, which I base coated with Abaddon Black because I want to have a nice tiny edge of shade around my silver, just to make it pop out a little bit more. Once done, I used Stormhost Silver to paint in the metallic parts. You can leave some parts of the black showing just to have some color differentiation and some natural shading. Next up is the rest of the suit. Ushabti Bone as a base coat on all the bright areas of this suit, which include the top part of the boots and the sides of her inner robe. Next I applied a second layer of Screaming Skull and covered most of the previously painted parts, but just leaving the back of the model, which is shaded by the cloak, and some shaded parts a bit darker. But about 75% of the area was repainted with this brighter color. I then added some highlights with Palette Witch Flesh. Just focused on those raised areas, the knees, some folds in the cloth, etc. Next color is Abaddon Black, and Abaddon Black I used as an outline on the edges of the boot and the inner part of her chest. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to have a second color on those edges of the boots. I wanted to add a brown color, but this way you have an instant shade like we did with the hairband. It's a tiny, maybe frustrating job, at least it was for me, but the result is worth it. Next we are painting in this black area with Baneblade Brown, and try and leave some black showing on the top and the bottom of your previously painted piece. So you get a nice result like this, with some nice dark edges around it. I also painted the panels on the front of her chest with the same color. For the tiny parts of pants showing, I used Black Templar. You can of course use a regular black paint if you want, but I like this contrast paint because it instantly creates some brighter and shaded areas. Then with Carrack Stone, I am highlighting the previously painted brown parts on the chest. And a tiny piece on the boots. Next, I'm glazing over it with a mixture of Seraphim Sepia and Lamium Medium to create some very subtle shades on the pants and the chest armor. Then I'm painting in the belts with dried bark. And a very tiny detail with Screaming Skull is the straps holding the clothing together. It is extremely tiny, but it looks very nice, so always try it, right? The cloak is then painted with a base color of Night Lord's Blue, which is a nice dark blue. Be very careful with the previously painted parts, and the really tough part on this one is the inner side of the cloak. I also painted the boots with a base color of blue. They're going to be having some gold details, but they're blue on the inside. Next, I'm highlighting the entire cloak with Thunderhawk blue, and afterwards I added some Fenrisian grey to the mix to emphasize those tiny details a little bit more, do some edge highlighting here and there. And if you want, you can take it even further by adding pure Fenrisian grey to your previous mix and brighten it up as much as you want. For the gold details, I'm using Retributor armor. This is a long and very precise job because there are tiny details on those boots that I really wanted to pick out. And there is a brooch on her chest holding the cloak together, so paint all of that with the gold color, also the hilt of the sword. Really check out the box art if you want to recreate the same pattern. It's a bit raised, but depending on how thick your base layers are, that might be difficult. Next up, Gorthor Brown on the bands around her ankles. And I highlighted those with some Baneblade Brown, just a tiny edge highlight. The metal, mainly the sword, I painted with Leadbelcher. But there were also some tiny buckles on her belt around her waist, so take them as well. Then highlight the metal parts with Canoptic Alloy, not the metal parts, just the gold parts. I then washed the metal with Nuln Oil, so you get that nice dark edge in the middle of the sword. And once that has dried, I'm using Stormhost Silver as a edge highlight, just to sharpen that sword up. Now just a few steps remaining. First of all, we're going to do the gloves with Apothecary White. I love Apothecary White because it's, in my opinion, a bit better than Nuln Oil, and in this case it even has a blue hue. Nuln Oil tends to be really black or dark grey, and this really adds to the blue cloak that we painted before. Dried Bark and Abaddon Black as a base color for the boots, which afterwards you can highlight by adding pure dried bark. You can take it a bit further by adding Baneblade Brown if you want. Now for the color of the base, I'm using Garagak Sewer. I really love this contrast paint because it's like an instant forest sandy look. Now in the meanwhile, I have also painted the mounted model with the same colors. There are some different options to put this one together, with or without a cloak, the sword, etc. There are some options there, but this is the one I chose. And the horse is nice and bright with the Grey Seer base coat, and I'm using a Dawnstone for the manes and the tail of the horse, just to make it a little bit darker, but not too much. I want to keep it nice and bright. Next up, Abaddon Black for the hooves. Then the horseshoes I painted with Leadbelcher. There's this nice triangle shape in front that really makes the horseshoe a little bit more interesting. And it really looks like the real deal. I then went back to my Dawnstone and painted some tiny details on the hooves of the horse. Some vertical lines, as if it were grooves or something like this. It adds very tiny detail, but I like those tiny details. Now it's time to paint the rest of the horse. And for that I'm using Apothecary White again. You can use Null Oil in a thinned down version if you want, but I find that the Apothecary White is a more subtle kind of shade. Make sure to take everything, including the tail and the manes of the horse, and let that dry for a few minutes. Now if you like these kind of videos and you haven't hit that subscribe button now, this might be the time to do so. For the nose of this horse, I'm using Cadian Flesh Tone to give it a bit of a fleshy look. It's a nice and pinkish color. I'm not really applying it very thick, but kind of dry brushing it on there. And I'm also using that for the inside of the ears. Now we want to kind of blend those colors together, the gray and the pink. And for that I'm taking Grey Seer again and watering it down quite some bit. You can use Lamia Medium if you want, or just water. And go over those raised areas of the head, leave the shaded parts as they are. And this way you can kind of pull the grey into the previously painted pink. You may have to do 2 or 3 layers to get the result you want, but it looks really nice in the end. I'm also applying this Grey Seer watered down version on the raised areas of this horse model, so the knees, the muscles, anything to emphasize the top part. And to take it even a little step further, I'm dry brushing some white scar on those spots as well. I also touched the manes with white scar so that the very tips of the manes would really stand out from the shaded parts we did before. And that looks amazing. I then added a drop of Null Oil in the nostrils. Don't make that too heavy. Then the reins are painted with dried bark, as well as the saddle and the straps below the belly. I then highlighted that with Baneblade Brown to give it a nice tiny edge highlight if you're able. And afterwards I washed everything with Agrax Earthshade. Well, not everything, just the brown parts. Well, you get it, right? And the front part of this saddle I painted with Mournfang Brown. The part on top was painted with Retributor Armor. And there was also something like this on the back of the saddle, so make sure to take that as well. Use Canoptic Alloy to highlight the gold parts, and you're done with the saddle. I then applied some lead belcher on the stirrups and the buckle on the belly of the horse. And there are some tiny parts on the reins around the mouth. And then it's time for the saddlebags. Tolkien sand as a base color for the saddlebags on both sides of the horse. And be very careful when you have the cloak hanging over it. The inside is so hard to paint. I then took some Baneblade Brown as a base color for this. Is it a sleeping bag? Or a travel bag? Well, whatever. This thing on the back. Then with some dried bark I'm painting the straps on the saddlebags. We're done to the final details now. I'm edge highlighting that with some Baneblade Brown. Tiny edge highlights. And there are some buckles on it, which I painted with lead belcher. Now once this is done, make sure to let that dry really good before washing it with some Agrax Earthshade. Just the saddlebags, not the top part. Because that thing on the top, which I'm still not sure how it's called, I'm washing with Nuln Oil. Just a tiny bit. Next I'm edge highlighting that with Rock Art Flesh. And for the saddlebags I'm going over it with the original color Tolerant Sand. Also an edge highlight here and there. And pick out some parts that you want to be brighter than the rest. It gives it a nice worn leathery look. Now we're almost there. The eyes of the horse. I'm using Black Templar because most of the visible part of the eye is black. There is a tiny piece of white in the corner of the eyes. And with this Black Templar it's a bit transparent. You can of course use Abaddon Black if you want. For me this worked best. And that's it for both our models of Hera, daughter of Helm. She looks fearsome, she looks amazing. I love the colors on these models, I love the models. Well, if you like this video, please leave a comment below if you haven't done already. Please follow my channel if you're interested, because I'm going to be making a lot more of these videos and I'll keep you posted when they appear. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this was of any use to you and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!